It's so easy to be enamored by the big cities, especially when it seems like everyone that you want to meet to help you build your startup is living in a big city such as New York City, Chicago, or even San Francisco. At least that's the way I felt when I co-founded my first startup called Fathom, where we made underwater drones, and we started it in a small town called Holland, Michigan, on the west side of the state of Michigan. It always felt like there was no one around, and I always felt like I needed to get on a train, on a plane to get to the right people, because being in a small town like Holland, I never felt like the right people or the resources were in Holland. I always felt like they were in these bigger cities like Chicago and New York City. Now that it's been almost 2 years since I left West Michigan, I'm feeling a bit different and asking myself a question I never thought I would ask myself. Is it now better to start a business in a small town? Small towns like Poughkeepsie, New York, and Holland, Michigan can be really nice. Poughkeepsie and Holland both have beautiful nature areas and views. Poughkeepsie has the longest elevated pedestrian bridge in the world, and Holland has some of the best beaches, especially with it being fresh water. And both are 2 hours away from big entrepreneurial cities, New York City and Chicago. Now, Poughkeepsie is a small town in the Hudson Valley, and Holland is a small town in West Michigan, but they both have the potential to grow into interesting entrepreneurial ecosystems, and the pandemic has actually helped them in this instance. There's a few reasons why Poughkeepsie, Holland, and other small towns can drive the future of entrepreneurial ecosystems. Reason number one is that a lot of small towns and cities are investing into entrepreneurship and innovation, primarily by creating what they call an innovation district. The entire state of Michigan actually does this primarily through what they call a smart zone, which is essentially taking part of the property taxes and investing that back into entrepreneurship and innovation programming. Now for Poughkeepsie, they're doing this primarily by creating an innovation district and having that be part of their downtown revitalization plans. Reason number two is cost of living and quality of life. Now, when I moved out of Michigan and into the East Coast, I didn't realize how big of a factor this was, and it is really significant. One is just rent and owning a home is so much more expensive on the East Coast comparatively to smaller cities such as like Holland, Michigan. Now, for reference, New York City's median rent is over $1 million, whereas cities like Poughkeepsie and Holland, it's around $300,000 to own a home. That is much more affordable, and yes, I get it, New York City is an anomaly, but living in a big city is so much more costly comparatively to these smaller cities. And also just the quality of life, having a big backyard is actually a bigger deal, especially if you have a 2-year-old dog like myself. Speaking of backyards, competition for talent is significantly different in these smaller cities and towns comparatively to the bigger cities. Because let's face it, a lot of the talent that you want to bring to your business probably has a family that they want to have a good quality of life, and the cost of living, if it's low, that's a big perk. And if you're in a smaller city, you can probably offer those things, especially if you're one of the high-tech innovation companies. That's really cool to work at. And so if they can have this really innovative company that they're a part of, and also this really high quality of life with low cost of living that they might have thought they only could get that in a big city, if you can give them that small city feel, that might be a huge perk to be able to recruit them into your business. And also, the pandemic has changed a lot about how we go about work and the expectations that come with that. Nowadays, a lot of us have the ability to work from home at least a few days of the week. And if you're in a small city or town, it might just make sense to have a fully remote workforce where maybe you do just have one in-person retreat a year. And you're remote first so you can recruit globally, and that just makes having an innovative business in a small city or town a lot easier. And the fourth reason why you should start a business in a small city compared to a big city is that a lot of the resources that only the big cities had pre-pandemic are now way more accessible to the smaller cities, because a lot of these programs, those mentors, those investors are way more accessible through virtual means. Now, is all that virtual means perfect and great? No, and there's still a lot of value for in-person meetings and programs and events. However, if you still need to get down there, especially if you're in a town like a city like Poughkeepsie, Holland, we're only 2 hours away from these big cities, you can just hop in your car or get on the train, book a bunch of back-to-back meetings, or go downtown to those big cities for those big events when you need to. So if you're in a small city that has access to the big cities, within a 2-hour drive, you can have the small city cost and the big city opportunities. Now, this isn't all to say that starting a business in a small city like Poughkeepsie or Holland is for everyone, because it's not. There's still a ton of value to be in these bigger entrepreneurial cities like New York City, Chicago, San Francisco. Pick a big city. It can be a really valuable resource, because there's nothing like being able to walk into a big incubator space, have all these different entrepreneurs around. There's the energy that just is different from everything else. There's still a lot of value in that. And also being able to just grab coffee with someone or meet someone serendipitously in these bigger cities, there's a lot of value to that. But do all of these pros outweigh the cons of living in the big cities? I don't think it's as significant as it once was pre-pandemic. Now, it's going to take time for these smaller ecosystems to develop, because entrepreneurial ecosystems take decades to develop. But the time is right for these smaller cities and these smaller towns to develop robust, diverse entrepreneurial ecosystems, because there are so many more resources and people around virtually for them to bring in and really create smaller, robust, diverse entrepreneurial ecosystems.